Hello everybody, it's been a long time since I've posted anything. I have been working on something, but it's a project that's taken me a very long time. And it's this model of a Ferrari. Now, I bought this model about 10 years ago from my son, or for my son, to build. But at the time I thought it was something that he could easily put together, but I think I might have overestimated it after I started working on it. Although it didn't matter because the idea was really just for him to try to put something together and see, how it came out. The idea was to make mistakes. I don't typically, well, I have not built a model in over 30, maybe 40 years. At first, I thought I'd do some kind of kit bash and make some kind of flying car. Um, and as I went through, I'm here unboxing and just pre-fitting some of the parts to see what it looks like and filing down some extra flash and the little nibs that are left behind when you cut it out of the spruce. As a matter of fact, I'm glad that my friend Ryan gave me those clippers there because they helped out a lot. Also, you saw that I went ahead and I sprayed the bottom chassis. I primered it black, and I did that with a rattle can, as I will with most of the parts in this build. I'll be sticking them onto a stick that I use to spray stuff, multiple items at once. But like I said, it'd been sitting around for 10 years in a closet, and I finally there was going to get rid of this thing. There's the stick that I use with some blue tack to put parts onto, especially if they're all going to be the same color, and then I'll spray them on that stick. And here we've jumped forward a little bit where I've put together the engine assembly from the instructions. This is a model that I've worked on one hour at a time here and there whenever I could. Of course, after the lockdown ended for us here in Florida, I went back to work, which is great for my bills. Great for me paying bills, but not for producing miniatures or model building or any artwork like that. But in any case, I pushed on. What I also learned doing this was that I had this grand idea of what I wanted to do with this model before I started. And as you see again, I took that piece out to get spray painted black, and I went away and now did the axle the same way. And as I went through the build and put this thing together, well, here I'm not sure yet. I know that I'm not using that big piece that I thought I might use. Uh, but as I went to get through to putting the piece together, I realized I got the idea of the old heavy metal cartoon that I saw when I was a kid, where they have this Corvette coming out of a shuttlecraft and going through the atmosphere and landing on the planet or on Earth, as a matter of fact, in the beginning of the movie. And it's an iconic scene. It's a scene replicated by the guys at Tesla when they shot their Tesla out into space just to prove that they could. It's an iconic scene of convertible with an astronaut in it. And I figured, you know what? I have a convertible Ferrari that I'm building. I don't particularly like model cars. I always used to build World War II vehicles. However, I might do that for this one. I'll figure it out. Another thing that's neat about starting this project, as you can see, I was having camera issues in the last few months, so it's another reason why I've posted a lot less until I figure that out. But all the skills that I reinforced painting my lead miniatures or my our lead and aluminum miniatures, I actually was able to apply into the painting and finishing of this particular model, which was nice. And so, I just keep referring back to this. When I was a kid, I would paint all the parts on the sprues, cut them out, then touch them up and put the whole unit together. But in this instance, I decided not to do that. I was taking everything out, removing the flash like you'd see, and then trying to paint them. I'd still paint them before I put it together, obviously, but not on the sprues. So here I've gone away to paint the, so yeah, again I primered the suspension system in black. And in some cases I'm just going to leave it black because this primer, I had two primers. I had one was Citadel black and the other one was a flat primer that I use. It's a Krylon matte camouflage, which I'm not sure if I used anywhere on here, but it certainly didn't use it on this chassis because I wanted it to be a nicer finish. That Krylon is a little rougher finish than this. And I'm jumping around different parts of the instructions. I looked ahead to see what I was getting into before I got there so that I can have an idea of how I wanted to address the different parts and whether or not I needed to paint or not. And I like to paint them whether you're going to see them or not, so I end up painting everything anyways. Uh, but again, I just jumped into this build without really thinking about how to go through it. Uh, yeah, so, and of course, I'm still thinking at this point that I might do something neat on it. I know that, well, I'm just running along and getting all the parts, all the assemblies painted and finished as best I can. And in this case, I used all kinds of paints. I used, as you can see, I have Citadel paints, which are water-based, and then I had some Tamiya, which are solvent-based, so those come off with their alcohol or their special solvent that you can buy. Um, and I just pretty much threw this kitchen sink at this thing, which is everything that I had in my arsenal to get this guy painted. And I'm going off of the colors that I saw on the box for this model. A Ferrari 360 by Revell. It's been sitting in a box for 10 years, and my choice was either to just throw this thing out of the house. Obviously, I'd probably give it away before I did that. Or just try and build it and see what I can do with it. And I thought I'd make a display where this thing would be on the wall. And I got that idea from an acquaintance of mine who I saw he had his model airplanes hanging on the wall like frames. And it looked really nice. It was neat to look at. And we were already working on the interior for this guy. And again, I'm actually following the directions on the instructions. I didn't think about looking for this car online. Later, my son, who's more familiar with modern day cars than I am, and this is probably not a modern vehicle because again the model's 10 years old, but he's more familiar with them, was showing me later on after I'd painted most of this, different options that people had done, which I didn't like. They were sporty and they had the interior panels which matched the exterior of the car, and it just wasn't as sophisticated as I thought a Ferrari should be. So I stuck to the painting instructions as best I could in the instructions that came with the model. So here I'm going on and painting the car doors and detailing those. And I'm trying not to ruin that black paint because I'm going to leave that, and that's going to be my black interior, which will end up being a black leather like you would find on any leather interior for a car, you know, some simple black leather. I think they requested a semi-gloss. This is a little more flatter than that, but I'm okay with that finish. And of course it matches the chairs, which I also spray painted black. And the neat thing about that Citadel black paint, that rattle can from Citadel is 20 bucks. It's expensive. And especially when you compare it to Krylon, which you can get for, I don't know, maybe 5 bucks or less, or 7 bucks. But the finish on that paint is way smoother and nicer, which is something I was looking for the car. Now, of course, the carpet in here was gray, so I went in there and I watered down my gray paints from Citadel. I had to give this a few passes. As you can see, the first pass that I gave it to, you could see the brush strokes, and you don't want to see that. I want to try to get as smooth a color in there as I can, even though later on you'll see that you don't get to see as much as that. I'm using the wash here to highlight the different details in the panel. You can see that. So now I move on to the center console, which comes already pre-colored in chrome. But that goes away as there you go, the door. But that goes away as soon as you cut it off the sprue, because then you see the white plastic underneath. So that looks like garbage, and you end up having to repaint that anyway. This is the emergency brake, which I did not want to go out there and do a spray can on that with just this tiny little piece. So I just went in and painted it by hand. But you'll notice the big difference here is that I end up having to paint that brake a few times because not having a primer on it, the paint didn't stick as well and you could see through it. So I ended up having to paint that a couple times to get that emergency brake the way I want it. So I'm using the Abaddon black here to paint the panels in the center console and moving this forward. And then I use a sharp wood, usually a toothpick. I also sharpen the back end of a brush to just clean up some of the edges. When I paint outside the lines, I could fake it sometimes just by using that little wooden piece or toothpick to scratch off the paint that I don't want. It really works out. And here I'm just going over the chrome parts and touching them up with a silver paint that I had that you can't really see too much the difference. So it's going to fool your eye, and you should be good with that. And then finally we get to the first decals. I wasn't used to having to put decals in the middle of the assembly. When I used to build World War II models, you know, I'd apply my decals at the end of the project or at the end of the assembly. But in this case, if I don't do this now, I'm not going to be able to get this onto this piece once the vehicle's assembled. So I go ahead and get my decal in there, and I use one of my fatter brushes that holds a lot of water to position it, as well as a toothpick to move it around and get it to the place I want to. So here I forgot to primer the front and back ends of the chassis of the body. Actually, those are both front ends. No, that's front and back. And so I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to try and paint this black with Abaddon because I'm going to go over it later anyway. And I just start doing that. But you can see again that I'm painting it with the water paint, or Citadel paints. And you can see the plastic through there. So I just gave up on that, went out and spray painted it black again. And I was done with it. I didn't waste time doing that. Decals are in there. And gonna try to use this newfangled glue that I didn't use before when I was a kid to glue the brake on there. And I was cleaning out the nozzle for it. Gave me a little bit of a hard time, but once I had it, I just used a couple tweezers and put that brake in. As you can see, it took me a little bit, but there it is, a couple fits, and boom, there's the center console. Do some touch-up work to that. Go back in, and I did some more touch-up work to this thing. I really wanted it to come out right, and like most projects that you work on, there's three things. There's the level of completion that you want, there's a level of completion that you can get with the materials, the time and materials that you have, and then finally, well, I guess part of two I just mentioned, the time. How much time do I want to spend on this particular project to get it to where I am satisfied with it? And so those are the three things that I come to realize as I work on this. I'm putting together the interior and I'm going to the next steps of the instructions, and it looks like I'm going to wheels. No, that is actually, oh, I can't see what that is because I used the wrong camera angle. then again, so I put it aside for a while, and here I'm back, and you can see I start to have issues with my camera again, so I start stuttering and stopping. But I've already primered the dashboard, and again, lucky for me, it's supposed to be black, so I'll keep it as black, and I get to apply some of these more paint to the base. I realized that the front part of that cabin needs to be painted the same color as the floor, because the carpet goes up. Then I drop these guys into the water for a little bit and make sure they get nice and soaked. And then again, I locate it with a big wet brush and a toothpick to get the right fit in there that I want. I also learned that sometimes the decals are not the right size to fit in these tight spots that they want you to. So I kind of faked them and push them in, and I knew that they'd dry and fit and stay. And I also knew that when I was done, nobody'd ever be messing with this model again, so I don't have to worry about them getting pushed off. You can't see that, but I'm actually putting the logo for Ferrari on the glove compartment there. But which leads me to wonder if in the future I should take an X-Acto knife and cut off the excess part of the decal. However, I know that sometimes you do that and it scratches the artwork of the decal, which then leaves you in a bind because then you're stuck without a decal. I didn't want to do that. And I'm sure that's why they invent, because I know there's a clear coat you could put over decals, but that's a whole other thing in my mind, because that's going to make things look a different finish on it. So I just kind of leave that alone. So I put the logo on the steering wheel and let that hang there and dry. While I work now on the cabin, or the engine compartment for the Ferrari. So I went ahead and sprayed the engine compartment black, and as you can see I've had some issues with my video again. And then I'll go back in and detail all the different parts of that engine compartment based on, again, the instructions that. And mind you, again, I'm not a car guy, so I never have really looked at a Ferrari other than from far away, and much less a Ferrari 360. I didn't even know they had that engine compartment like that, so which I thought was kind of neat. And I do know about mechanics, and I can tell which parts are which on this particular engine, but the layout is not the same as what I'm used to in a regular car. Now I'm an older car guy. I'll work on anything from the 60s up all to the 80s, and then in the 90s it starts to get questionable because the technology changed a lot for me. But I got the idea. Like, I have no idea what that. I'm assuming that's the radiator in the back, but I don't think so. I know those are that's the head with the valve covers, and that's the block. That's probably that part I'm painting now is got to be the intake where a carburetor would normally go, but I'm sure this is fuel injection with a bunch of computers and whatnot, which is where I end on my mechanical knowledge. I'm not into the computer part of it. So again, I'm following those directions to paint this engine the right way, and then I use this red. Now I know I went out and bought Italian Red by Tamiya spray can. Now this is the paint that I had on hand, which is a gloss paint. And I know that it's very similar to the Italian Red, but not exactly the same. But you'll see later on that since it's a small part and it's not right on the existing Italian Red, but next to it, it's close enough to where I don't think you can tell that it's not the exact same red. And again, I'm also very frugal. I'm not buying a whole can of paint just for these two valve covers, I'll tell you right now. And I could have gone crazy and so here I am just looking at, to mask off the engine compartment, but that wouldn't have made sense either. So here I decided outright to go ahead and make this match the interior of the car. And these wings, as I lack for a better word, call them, they again take a few passes of paint to get a nice smooth finish on them. But interestingly enough, when I go to put this thing together, it doesn't fit. It's too big. I actually end up cutting up part of the top of that compartment and loosening. So then I went out here. You'll see I wanted to put the astronaut in there from the movie, like from Heavy Metal the movie. So I went out and I found a 2-scale toy of an astronaut. I thought it would be plastic, but it was made out of rubber, which I guess was a good thing because it allowed me to work a lot easier in reposing him and reworking him. So now the whole car assembly stopped, and now I'm just cutting up this action, not, this in action figure because you can't pose him, in order to try to get him to fit and sit properly in the Ferrari. And I can tell you right now, my first mistake was cutting the legs off like that in a V shape, because I'm still thinking like an action figure or like regular anatomy where I'm gonna just move it up and pose it. But you know, it's just the thing of trial and error, and I just put it in, and then I realized that his boots are too big, even though it's the right scale. You know, these astronaut suits are super bulky, right? So I gotta like tweak this thing and figure that out, and then I'm just looking to see. Now, luckily, because it's made out of rubber, I'm able to use some needles to pin this stuff together and start to pose him the way I want him. As a matter of fact, I end up leaving the needles in him and cutting off whatever I can't push into the body so that they disappear. And you'll see later on the head of one of the needles that I pushed into him to hold his arm in place. It just ends up looking like a button. So in there, of course, I actually own a thimble to use with needles, because sometimes you just gotta sew your stuff on your own, guys. You can't just wait for grandma to sew your stuff together or a button falls off. You go ahead and do that yourself. Anyhow, it's just a process of trial and error and fitting this guy in here and getting him to where I want him. And then I'm thinking about already about how I'm going to fill in the cracks or the joints of the different parts that I'm creating by reposing this astronaut. And in my head, I'm thinking I'm going to mess around with that liquid green stuff I've got just to see. It's funny when you see his feet, because I don't know how you guys, when you guys drive, it's a weird position if you think about it, especially in a car like a Ferrari where your feet are out in front of you. I know a lot of Toyotas are like that too. It's not like when you're sitting in a truck and you're actually sitting with knees bent. So I had to kind of like, you know, finagle this, and I end up cutting the back of one of his feet off just to make sure this thing fits right. And so it's a bit of a process, and it took me a while just to figure out how he was going to fit. As you can see here, this is sped up by multiple times. And now even I can't get the pins in, so I'm going to try and drill a hole. And here I am finally with some green stuff. You can see in that one leg, just trying to get that in. And there, I think I'm pretty happy with that. And I start to work with that, or work further from there. And here now I'm going to try and pin this arm in. And I had to drill in that hole to make it work because it just was not accepting the pin work that I needed to hold that arm in place. But yeah, it starts to come together, and it's just being dogged with this thing. But again, this took a while. Like I said, I've been working on this thing for months, so, and I want to get this guy right, because he can't look. If it looks like a toy in the car, even though it's a toy car, it's not going to be right. Again, just fitting him back and forth, trying to fit him in there. And we'll watch a little bit of that. I didn't want to cut out any aspect of the build that I'd recorded, because there had been very few parts that I just did without it. Because like I said, I was having trouble with the camera for a while, and it started getting into the way of my productivity, you know. And now the thing, my hobby became get the camera working, as opposed to building a model or painting a miniature or making a piece of art. So you'll forgive me if there's any parts that are skipped on camera. So I'm leaving as much as I can in. And you see here, I actually had to cut his foot off and then re-glue it to his leg to get it to fit properly because I didn't want to modify the dashboard. I could have easily just cut the gas pedal off of the dash and then he would have fit fine. But I don't know. I didn't want to modify the model anymore. I'm already committed to making this look like the the like the Corvette in the heavy metal movie. So I want to just keep the Ferrari, uh, stock for lack of a better word. I ended up having to resculpt that right leg. I just don't use the part I cut off and resculpt it. And something that you won't see on the camera is that I use a Dremel later on to form it. I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to try and use some of this liquid green stuff to fill in the gaps here that I couldn't fill before. And I try to just get it all watery and seep it in there and stuff like that. But again, this is a process of trial and error. And I'm putting green stuff on a rubbery material. But it did work a little bit, but not like I wanted. And I used the brush kind of to smooth it out. And it works in some cases, and in other cases it doesn't. But and I'm not worried about getting it anywhere else because I'm going to end up repainting this guy. So I work with the green stuff for a while and I'll let that sit. I don't want to get it on his visor because I know I want that to be a nice gold smooth surface when I'm done. Just smoothing off the edges on our astronaut pilot here. So you can see a little bit of that as I go, and it's just trial and error, water and brush, back and forth. I got the toothpick, the Q-tips to help me clean off areas that I really didn't want any material on, and I'm just trying to goop it all in there. You can see it's kind of, I might have to, I don't know how smooth liquid green stuff is supposed to be. This is more materials that I got from that buddy of mine that he didn't want to do this stuff anymore, or said he couldn't, and so I'm using it here. So here you have a still picture of what that looks like when I'm done, and I'm just letting that sit overnight to fill, so that I can then paint it. I do see that I missed the seam between his right leg and his body, and I go back and I fill that in later, and here it is now, a primered figure, ready to get painted. And those green pieces that you see me cutting there, those are the pieces that I just finished, I guess, not I guess, I know because I can tell, I can see my figure up there, adding those details to the astronaut. And here I'm removing the blue tack that I used as a mask on those parts to keep those things black. And I put them in that little cardboard box because I just happen to have it, and it keeps the dust off them while I work on the rest of the car. Because this guy is going to be sitting around for months. Like I said, I started this months ago, and I'm just now putting together this video. So now I'm going to try and I'm cleaning up my mess a little bit. I'm touching up some of the white that I spray painted on the astronaut figure, and I'm going over that. And then later, as you can see, well, I'm just going to approach it like I paint a mini, except he's a little bigger than usual, and the blue tack sometimes has a hard time holding him in place. Like you see, he starts to fall over. But I just pick him up and lean him the other way and keep on keeping on, right? Uh, and we'll go at it. Make sure I get a nice base coat of white on there. Took him off, re-glued him in a spot that I know you're not going to see once he's installed in the model. And always got to keep your brushes clean, of course. And now I'm going to add some details, right? You got the gray spots that I want to add. His boots were gray originally, and I'm going to make them gray again. I think it's a nice detail and adds some contrast and makes the figure interesting to look at. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then of course those seams that I added on the knee and the shoulders, I'll go ahead and make those gray as well. You can see that, and of course the gloves will be gray, and that I think just adds a nice layer of contrast to our astronaut. And I know that you see most. I wanted to make him a sci-fi astronaut. I think in the cartoon it's not that clean of a space suit that the guy wears. You know, he is in a convertible in space, so I'm gonna figure that I can do some detailing on this guy that's gonna make him look right. So you can see I'm having issues with my cameras again. It's jumping, but I'm gonna let it go so you can see how I paint all those different parts. And I'm using again Citadel water-based paints. Start painting those details. He's got not suspenders, but he's got these belt system that's holding that camera on his chest in place. That camera comes from the camera that one of our astronauts had on the rocket in one of our past real life space missions. I left it on him. I thought it was neat. As a matter of fact, I remember watching an Adam Savage video where he remade that particular camera. You know, he likes to make stuff like that. So I kept it in there as part of our character here, our astronaut character. So now, yeah, I'm painting the lens on that camera with a silver, which I think is going to work. And then again, always clean your brushes. Not necessarily with soap if you don't have it, but make sure they're clean when you're done. And now I'm taking a look at the, again, while he dries, I'm going to go back and work on the body of the Ferrari. So I'm taking off the blue stuff that I used to hold it to the stick while I painted it. And this is just a picture I took of my desk while I was working on this thing. Because it's just, it lived on my desk for a long time. And so I'm putting these parts away so that they don't get full of dirt or dust on my desk while I work on the astronaut. So here now, I'm thinking instead of trying to paint the American flag on his shoulder, I might be able to use a ballpoint pen or a pin. And that didn't work, so then I jumped over to a small brush and this paint, and I'm going to try that. And again, this whole project is a system of trial and error. Just going in and repainting or painting in the stripes for the American flag. I'm trying to get them all the same thickness with my brush. You can see I screw that up there, right? And now I'm like, okay, well maybe I'm going to try the reverse. So I paint the whole patch red, right? And I think I'll go back over it with white and put white stripes. And again, having problems with my camera, but that doesn't work, as you can see. So I end up just painting right over all that red and white and making it all white again. I pull the pin back out, and now I get a ballpoint, and that is actually doing the trick for me. I'm able to get all of the stripes just like a real flag, and between the ballpoint pin, the felt tip pin, and white paintbrush, I'm able to get the right amount of stripes at the right thickness. And then I go ahead and put in the blue field, and I certainly am not going to paint 50 stars in that blue field because it's just too small for me. But I think it does the trick for the eye when somebody sees it. Plus, I know that I'm going to hide some of my boo-boos when I weather this guy up because I've been planning on weathering him up from the get-go. So here I go. I'm cleaning my brushes again. Make sure they're clean because I know that there was one time I left them dirty just out of laziness, and it was really a bear to reconstitute these brushes. Now I'm adding details that were already on the little figure before, and I'm matching them so that he has those similar details because I'm not too familiar with the details on a spacesuit. But here and then I'm going to go ahead and add my wash. This is a gray wash from Citadel. It's the Null Oil. And I really like the way it brings out all the different, you know, the nooks and crannies. It does look like a fabric, which at the end of the day, that's what an astronaut suit is made out of, fabric. And I don't weather over the flag. I did that on purpose. And I set him aside to dry, and I'm going to relook at my instructions. Then I'll remember to close my paint bottle there because I forgot. And we're going to go on to the next part of the instructions, and that is to start using some of these clear parts. And the instructions here for the rear, the rear lights, tail lights. There's red and yellow tail lights. When you paint it like this, like I'm painting now, the interior part that I'm painting is the center of the light, and because it's a clear piece, you can see it. But now I'm waiting for that tail lights to dry, and I jump back on our figure, right? And now I'm going to just do some dry brush to whiten them back up again, because the uh, the wash made them too dark. But I go back over them with the dry brush, and it lightens them up and gives them a nice weathered look. And I'm going to touch up some of those parts. And again, I didn't touch the flag. I wanted that flag to stick out because I was proud of that flag. And now here I'm using an oil-based paint of Tester's Gloss Gold to do his visor, because I think that visor needs to be shiny. And I find that the oil-based gold paints or metallic paints are the best, especially if you want a nice finish on there. Now right now it's wet, so it looks great. As it dries, it might look something different. I'm going to take some pictures of it with my phone. I get all happy and post them. You'll see those pictures in a second as they pop up. So while that dries, then I jump back onto the engine compartment, and it looks like I need to do another pass at those side wings of the engine compartments, because I'm not happy with the finish or the layer of them. And I'll hit those again. And this is just the whole process of me circling around every little piece, working on multiple parts of this vehicle over and over again just to get it right. And it looks like I'm not happy with the valve covers. And I'm going to go ahead and probably add another pass of red on it. See, and again, I jump back over to the astronaut, and then put them aside and jump back on the engine compartment and just add another layer, because you could see the black through the red, and I don't want that. So we're just going to reinforce that by adding another layer of red paint on there. Yeah, and then as you saw how I jumped from the astronaut back to the car, back to the astronaut. At first, this video is so long, I thought about separating the clips out for the astronaut and then the Ferrari, but that would have been, you'll never see this video, because that would have been a whole lot of editing, because it's not like I sat down and worked on only the Ferrari and then I only worked on the astronaut. I really approached the whole thing as one big project. So, and sometimes you have to do that, otherwise you're just going to get stopped. You get stopped and you're not going to move forward on your project. So I was able to jump around. And here I'm fitting in, or actually gluing in now, the rear end of this thing. And I'm using that new plastic glue that welds it together. And I like it. It actually works out pretty good. And now I'm dry fitting the engine. This is where I go like on a wild, like a side road. Like I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to retrofit this toy that has lights and sounds, and I'm going to put them into the lights of the Ferrari. And I'm showing you this because I want to again reiterate how you don't always get everything you want or that you think you want when you start the project. And it's because this is my personal project, I can make decisions and changes as I wish. If I was doing this for a client and it had to have lights and stuff, then I would have had to figure it. This would have been another nightmare. I don't have electronics tools. I don't have a soldering iron. I do know how to do this stuff. I used to do it when I was a kid. Uh, Here I'm I'm thinking about labeling wires, because I'm going to take this stuff apart and rerun wires. But these wires are so thin that, I end up scrounging through. I have like a bucket of wires, and I find other wires that I could use, but they're so thin and delicate. Now that piece there, I could not break apart without destroying it. So that one was a bear. But I spent a good amount of time, as you can see, just trying to undo this toy and figure out what. Yeah, see, and I repainted the lights again. I didn't like the way they came out, and I repainted them again. And then this is where I think I realized that I need to paint the rim of those lights. No, not yet, but there they are. So again, jumping around, and I spent a lot of time, just an inordinate amount, more than what it needed to be, to do this part. I saved these parts. Um, And it's just a wild goose chase that I've set myself on to figure out how I'm going to integrate this electrical system into my Ferrari build. And it's a bear. I just jump back and forth and make progress where I can. Oh, I know what I'm doing here is I'm getting ready to put the lights in. And not only that, but I'm also figuring out where I'm going to fit that electrical stuff. And so that's all happening all at once. I got tired of working on the electrical, and here is the astronaut after he's all weathered. And this close-up view, eh, this is a nice view. Actually, I don't think this does it justice. There you go. There's my astronaut, and he's going to be sitting in his Ferrari. Sure. Oh, there he is, sitting in the Ferrari in the next video. And I've got a good position. He's got one hand on the shifter, and he's got one hand out towards the steering wheel. And now I'm just again still fitting and checking and fitting and checking. He might have moved a little bit when he was in drying and all the manipulation that I'd done with him. But I want to be careful not to break him because that's just going to be another setback. But here I've dry fitting the cockpit with the astronaut in it into place on the bottom chassis. I've got the engine glued in place. And what I didn't realize at the time, like that up in the front, I'm actually very happy with that joint I just did at the front because otherwise there would have been a light leak in the engine well and it would have looked like garbage. But what I didn't realize at the time was that it warped my chassis. So when I go to put the body on this, it causes me some other problems. But I'm not aware of that now. I'll be aware of that when I go to build another Ferrari if that ever happens, and it probably is not, but I'm not aware of it when it's happening here. And you can see that it kind of gives when I push down pressure. I'm pushing down pressure and trying to let it dry. Looks like I'm just letting it dry for a little bit and then I come back. And now while it's drying, I'm going to try to do work on my electrical components. Because now is the time to put those electrical components in. And so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to run wire and get power to those LEDs and hide those LEDs behind the glass parts or the clear parts of my Ferrari. So I'm playing with that and it's just time wasted. And so what should have happened is I should have from the get-go, this is probably the first thing I should have done was wire up an electrical system for this project. And I think I've realized now after doing what I just did there that I'm not installing any lights on this thing. I'm just going to go ahead and make my regular model and with my astronaut. So I'm adding decals where they're needed. I didn't see which ones I cut. Oh, so these are the Ferrari logos that go on top of the valve covers. And you can bet that I looked 4 or 5 times at the instructions to make sure I put them in the right direction. So I did that. And I got them on my finger and on that wet brush. And I'm going to try and drop them in there. And there's even a Ferrari logo that goes on that center throttle body. But it's gray, so you don't see it when I drop it on there. But I put it in there because that's where it goes. And then I get to jump over to the wheels, and the wheels are fun. And I start taking those apart. And I wasn't sure what those were, but I realized those are disc brakes there. They came already pre-finished in chrome, which I think will look fine. And these are the wheel parts. And you get the actual tires over there. Fat tires on the back, thin tires in the front. And I'm going to paint me some parts. So I'm going to go ahead and get my blue tack again and put that on my stick and walk out to the backyard. So there is the stick with the freshly painted black parts, and I gotta wait for that to dry, so I'll set that aside and look and see what's next on the instructions. And looks like it's glass, so now it's the windshield. It's a trial and error thing. Well, now I see that the windshield has black painted areas. I think what I would have done in the next time around, rather than paint it by hand, because I thought I could get it to work, and it did, it worked. But I think I put like 4 or 5 passes of black paint on this thing when I could have easily just masked off the clear area and spray painted this black in one shot, and it would have been a way cleaner look. But the end result is not bad. You guys can judge when you take a look at it. But I go ahead and paint it, and I know it's critical to get this right because once I put it in the body of the Ferrari, I'm not going to get to touch this up again. So this has got to work first go around. So I'm going to spend my time, and I'm gooping this thing on. As you can see, I'm not watering down the paint. Um, Apparently I got some dirt on the windshield, but I'm also not so worried about that because in the movie for the Corvette, there's a part where he gets dirt on the windshield and the wipers wipe it off. And so I'm going to attempt to simulate that. And I'm going to do it wrong in this assembly, and I'll show you when I get there. Layer over layer, and then using a toothpick to scratch off any excess that I don't want to make sure, because again, because it's clear, you're going to see a bad edge if I don't have a straight line. So I have to use my toothpick to do that. So I'm going back in and looking at the next parts, and now it's time to add these decals to the window over the engine compartment, which I thought is an interesting deal from the Ferrari. So I'm dry fitting some glass, I'm cutting some parts, there I go, boom, drop that in the water, and they're so big they're pretty easy to get into place and slip it right off. And I use my wet brush to push out any air bubbles beneath the decal, get them in place, and then set it aside and let it dry. So again, I'm just making sure I have them fit right and proper. So that's something I did while I'm waiting for something else to dry. And then here's a picture of our astronaut in his Ferrari chassis anyways. I do like that weld line on my wheel wells. And here is the rims. I decided to go with gold just because it matches his visor. And here I have the body of the Ferrari upside down with the window in it while it dries, the engine compartment window. And here I'm going to assemble the wheels for the Ferrari as per the instruction. There's your disc brake, and these are your calipers. This thing has 4-wheel brakes, and he's got these calipers that are painted in red. So I'm going to take them off the sprue that I spray painted black, and I'll go over them with some red and black paint. And I put all 4 of them on that blue tack that you see there. Well, actually, looks like I went with the oil-based paint first, and I wasn't happy with it. So, or was I? What did I do? No, I went Tamiya first. Now I'm going with oil-based. So this is another red, not the same red as the Italian red, but again, it's so small and in such a place that I know that it's going to create the illusion of matching the rest of the car. And just you know it because I'm telling you. But had I not told you, you would have looked at the car and you would not have known that this is a different red because it's close enough. And I like it because this oil base is already glossy, so I don't have to worry about clear coating it gloss or anything like that. I just got to let it dry and do its thing. And then because I know these are calipers, I'm painting them all with a gunmetal color to make it look more mechanical. But the way that this thing comes together, the car comes together, the wheels go on. They're only glued on with on the back end of that caliper. So now I'm putting, oh, that's the horse, that's the Ferrari horse that I talked about. It goes on the throttle body, and it's gray. So you can see that it's gray, and I put it on there, and you can't even see it now. It's there, but you can't see it because it's gray on top of gray. But I put it in there, darn it. Looks like I'm re-gluing part of that chassis, which unbeknownst to me later causes me issues because it warps the chassis. And also those big fins on the engine compartment, I don't know if it was something that I did or the way the model was. I heard some reviews of this model, and I heard that some parts didn't go together right, but it didn't say which ones. I had to modify that. But here I'm giving another pass to the calipers so you don't see the black primer beneath. So I'm going ahead and do that. And I clean my brush up again. And here we go. We got our black wheel spray painted black. Checking my instructions to see what I'm going to do next. Oh, and here I'm installing the headlights into the front nose of the vehicle. And they pretty much snap into place, but I reinforced that with this glue. This is a PVC glue. It dries clear. It's made for you to use with windshields and stuff like that. So now I'm going to go ahead and install the windshield wipers. Put some glue on them. Let that dry. And then I'm gluing up that back glass panel. And I'm working on the front nose again. I just keep jumping around. Like I said, I'm touching up that black grill because I guess I got some red in there regardless of my masking. Because that black grill gets buried in there. And then you see I've already glued on the windshield wipers and the windshield to the body. And that's going to get me later because I should have done something before I did that. Yeah. So I'm starting to install the glass part of the front headlights. And one side fits fine and the other side is a little off. And again, I'm not sure if that's the nature of the plastic model or something that I might have done wrong, although I have not done much to the body. And then the other thing is that this comes with this wire mesh that you would think the better thing to do is to sandwich this mesh in between two pieces of plastic, but they actually are asking you to glue this right into that space there, which is tough, you know? So I'm glad they gave me extra material because I screwed up those side pieces a couple of times. I'm cutting the shapes out, getting them. I end up using my scissors, I think. Oh no, I see what I did. And then I use that as a guide to cut my plastic, my meshes out. So I'm dry fitting all of that. And I don't know if you recall, but earlier I said I was going to have to paint those roll bars in black. And it looks like that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and boom, 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 knock that out with some Abaddon black. Get it going. And I did rush a lot of my paint work on this thing. Like I said, this thing was on my desk for so long that I just wanted to finish it. But I didn't want it to come out bad either, so I want to make sure I do a good job. But like I said, I always think I can do better, and I will next time, I'm sure. So we let that dry for a little bit. And then go hit it again. That's what I like about the water-based paints. They dry pretty quick. And now I'm just going to go ahead and try and dry fit or fit on these mesh panels. And I'm going to use that clear PVC glue because I think that's the best way to go. And it'll be easy to, if I screw it up too bad, it'll be easy for me to clean up. If I go with one of the other glues, it's just going to kill it, especially if I goof it up. And I can tell you that when I did it, I didn't like it. But as you can see, there they are installed. And they're not as bad as I thought they would be. And here is my Ferrari body with all the glass parts in it. And I'm just adding some more glue to it. And I'm pretty happy with it. At this point, I don't notice some of the things that you might notice it when you look at the live model. But here's the other part. I painted this thing right before I assembled it, and there's some scuffs in the red paint now that I'm not happy with. Um, but they're not that major, and I'm able to buff them out later. And so right now here I'm installing the rear view mirror. And what the model doesn't show you or tell you is that you can see the front side of that rear view mirror through the glass, or at least I didn't notice. There's my wheel with the Ferrari logo on the caliper and on the wheel itself. Here is our man in his Ferrari with wheels now, so you can technically go. And that was the finished model, at least for now. So then now I figured out, I was at the store and I saw this shadow box. And that's when I realized how I was going to finally mount this thing on the wall. So I got this shadow box, and I was going to do a 3D background, but then I realized I had felt, and I could paint on the felt. I'd never done that before. So I'm just gooping on the paint and referring to the actual image from the movie to see more or less what that looked like. So I'm just laying in the paint for that. And it doesn't look as good as I would like it to, but I'm just going to keep on hitting it with color and see what I can get away with. Plus I know that the car itself is going to occupy a lot of the visible space here. So I'll just keep painting and adding and painting and adding. And as a matter of fact, even later I'll mask off the planet and take a black spray can and clean up that edge to make it a little more crisp. And I'll add some yellows in there and make sure that they look right, and add a little bit of more blue. And remember, this is from outer space, so it's you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. I mix me some green and yellow, and it just adds a little depth to our planet here. All right. So once I get that to a point, that's the masking I was talking about. I mask that sucker off, cut it out, put it on, and I'll take that outside. I spray can it, then I drip some paint for stars, as you can see in the back, and then I'll add some different color star. Well, I'll paint on some more white stars, but I'll go back and add some yellows and purples and reds. And even though you may not register in your eye, you'll subconsciously you'll know those colors are there, and it again just adds a little bit of depth to the image. Interestingly enough, this thing looks way better in the shadow box than it does like as you see it here. And I'm willing to run with this just to see where it goes, because remember, I know that most of this gets covered with the Ferrari. So then my next step is to figure out how to mount the Ferrari to this thing, right? I'm still hitting it here. Oh, I added some more wash to the planet to hide some of it, and there's the finished background. Uh, and it's not too bad if I don't mind saying. So here's when I realized I should have weathered that windshield before I put it in, but I'll do it after the fact, which is not the way to do it. So I cut out some, I measured it with my compass, and I cut out some masking, and I realized, okay, I need to make it in two parts, so I'll do that. Slip it underneath there, and then get the next one, slip it underneath there. And then I'm just going to get a brush and dirty up that window. And it'll do the trick. I use wash, so wash is clear, but you can see the dirt. And I just add that wash to it, let that dry, and clean my equipment again and put that away. And while it dries, this is where I take a hanger, and I'm going to make the support for my Ferrari. So it turns out that the back side of that shadow box is made out of what do you call it, foam core. It's foam core, and it's got that black felt glued onto it. So here I am. I removed these templates, and there you go. I got my wash. So now I'm just fitting and playing with this system, and I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do to hold that car in place. And I thought I'd be able to use this bottle cap because I got a million of them, because I drink water like a fish, and I need to get a filter so I don't have to use any more plastic bottles. But I have them. And not only do I use them to hold paint while I'm painting, but I thought I might be able to use it to hold the car onto this frame, the armature that I made. But what ends up happening is I locate it, I install it, right? I poke the holes through the back, right? Install that. I get the car on there, and it looks pretty darn good. And you won't see how I finished doing it, but I ended up having to go with another way to mount this because my car flipped over and fell off when I installed it the first time. Yeah, I had it just like that. It looked good, and it flipped over and fell off on me. And I leave it glued overnight, I think it was, if I remember correctly. And it looks neat. I end up having to do something else. So finally, this is the car mounted in the light box, and I like it. I like it was I made that custom tag there, radar rider, just like in the movie. There's my little American flag on his shoulder, and this is through the glass of the box. All of these are through the glass because I've already installed this. And here is my radar rider, and I don't think any of these pictures or movies do it justice. I need to learn how to take better pictures. I made that license plate with my label maker, and I thought it was great. There's the engine, the Ferrari engine and its details. There's my astronaut pilot, just like in the movie. This guy has a Ferrari instead of a Corvette. And there's my dirty window with the wipers working. And I'm just going to finish on his shoulder with that flag. And here's the final build hanging on the wall of my office. Again, terrible picture. I got to figure that out, but hope you like it and hope it inspires you to do something similar. Thanks a lot for watching. Flico Paints out.